Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome to this special live edition of Office Hours FM. I apologize for the technical difficulty and the slight late start getting started, but got a treat for you tonight. I've got Mr. Chris Lemma on the show. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm glad to hear you're doing good. I would be doing better if I understood how Facebook Live actually worked. But you know, sometimes you gotta go with what you know. So here we are in a Google Hangout, and I'm trying to navigate over to Facebook to post this link so that someone can actually join us in this conversation. Chris, while I am doing that, could you please give an introduction to yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. I am the Vice President of Products and Innovation at a hosting company called Liquid Web. There I manage products like our managed WordPress hosting and the upcoming managed WooCommerce product. And beyond that, I am a blogger over at chrislemma.com, a speaker at WordCamps, and a friend of Carrie Dill's.
And a cigar aficionado and a lover of hot tubs.
Yes.
I mean, really,
my own hot tub. I mean, I don't run around to other people's hot tubs, just to be clear, right?
Oh, okay. You are discerning when it comes to
a hot tub snob, really.
That's okay. I think that's legitimate.
Yeah.
I am, believe it or not, still having trouble just clicking buttons because apparently, you know, when you get sick and you feel terrible and you make a doctor's appointment and they're like, we can't see you today, but we'll see you in the morning. And by the time you get there in the morning, you feel totally better. I
do know that situation.
So it's all, I feel a little bit with that trying to get Facebook to cooperate right now, that by the time I get it to cooperate, the live broadcast will actually be completed.
Well, can't you simply go to the Facebook area and say, go to officehours.fm, and isn't this streaming live on Office Hours FM?
I don't have that happening.
Got it. Well, then you can't do that.
Yeah, it's just a little browser hanging upper thing. You know what? Maybe when in doubt, let's try Firefox. Nobody's with us right now, so they won't be annoyed by this conversation, only annoyed that we're 10 minutes late to the party.
And shouldn't Google Hangouts give you a URL to share?
Yes. So I do have a shareable URL that okay. So Chris, tell me about this ice machine that you got. I didn't realize like that was a thing.
It's the Nugget Ice, or some folks out there in Texas may call it Sonic Ice.
I am familiar with Sonic Ice.
Yeah, well, I have a machine now that does that.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
I'm excited about it.
I might need to get one.
When you read my lower third, is it showing up correctly?
Yes, it'll appear backwards for you, but just right for the rest of us.
Yep, that's good.
And slowly, things are turning.
I would gladly tweet whatever URL you want me to tweet. I just don't know what the URL is.
Yeah, I am. Oh, it's coming right now. The rest of us.
Yep, that's good.
All right, I'm slacking that to you. Okay. Golly, buddy. All right, got something on the page.
So any minute now, droves of people will join us.
I mean, millions, if we've done this right, which I clearly have not. Just kidding. Okay, posted to Facebook. Now just to do the final step of posting to the Twitters. And if you already did that, then I'm going to.
You just have to retweet mine and you're good.
I'm going to do that retweeting. Apparently, running a Hangout is an extensive challenge for my hard drive at this moment.
It is work. It is work. We at Liquid Web we use meet.google.com or whatever the new Hangouts is that is for corporations, and people are like, "This thing changes every now and then," and I go, "Yeah, just like Hangouts." They're like, "Well, we like Hangouts," and I'm like, "Yeah." I ran a show for several years that was Hangouts every week, and the software changed just about every 3 weeks. And I don't know many players who can build software that changes every 3 weeks and not have a blip, an issue. I don't like that many releases. So
yeah, I dare say there are more Google Hangout releases than there are Yoast SEO plugin releases.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
Which is serious. All right, we got a few folks trickling in. Thank you to those who are joining us, and I do apologize for getting a late start. It would not be this podcast if there were not technical difficulties. It's become my unfortunate trademark. But I am going to see if I can get rid of dogs. Okay,
I was like, wow, that's the quietest I've ever heard anyone get rid of dogs. And then I realized, oh, she muted herself. I thought maybe you had one of those humanly inaudible whistles that the dogs heard, but that would be a cool trick.
Well, I'm one of those dog whisperers, and so it's. I mean, for me, it's no big deal. Someday I'll post how I'm doing that, how I'm making that happen. Okay, so we've got folks coming in. We're actually, yes, we are going to get started doing this. So to give a little bit of context, a little bit of background, WooCommerce, who was acquired by Automatic, not really the owners of WordPress, the guardians you could say
the people who run WordPress.com.
Yes, thank you. And WooCommerce recently announced a pricing change, which is really just a change of when you go to do a renewal, instead of getting a 50% discount, which is kind of common in the software space, you get a little bit of a renewal or discount for being an ongoing customer, and they took that away. So that's what we're going to be chatting about. So Chris, maybe just start by what's the landscape that you've seen on social media? Are people up in a big hoo-ha or what?
Yeah, so to be clear, there was no announcement, right? So it just disappeared, right? The 50% discount disappeared. It wasn't there. And when you went to renew, it was a full price. And it caught some people by surprise, which caused some people to start talking. And so the general landscape has been by far and wide, it's been predominantly negative, right? That this is horrible, this is bad, it's time to move off of WooCommerce, right? This is the last straw among many of why we should just be done with this place, because this is crazy, right? It's just a money grab. And the thing, to put it into full context, right? Several years ago, WooThemes, the company behind WooCommerce before Automatic purchased WooThemes at one point also did a change to their terms of service, right? They were totally allowed to do the change because in their terms of service it said, and we reserve the right to change our terms of service, right? So they had the right to change it. And the change itself was one of those things that people felt frustrated with. But it was more the messaging than the actual change that I think really got people up in arms. So several years ago, at one point, they did the math, right? And as you would expect a company to do, they looked at the number of tickets they were getting in and the number of people that they were supporting across all those WooCommerce extensions. And they're just like, we can't do this unlimited support for unlimited number of products, for unlimited number of sites, for the one-time fee, right? And so they started talking about the fact that you're going to have a limited number of sites for a limited amount of time, like for a year. And people were up in arms. But it wasn't so much the change as much as two little dynamics that happened. One was just before the announcement, WooThemes had run a sale, a kind of, get in now. And so people had bought stuff only to discover that this unlimited license was not going to be real. Like, so people who had bought, right, they specifically bought an unlimited license only to discover a month or two later that it wasn't unlimited. That made them upset. Because it felt like a money grab to them. Like you pitched us knowing that you were going to do this. And then the second piece was the email that was sent out. And the email that was sent out went something like, the first draft of it, right, went something like, hey, you're making a lot of money. We should make more money. And you go, wait a minute. That's probably not the message you intended, right? Which, in honesty, it wasn't, right? What they were trying to say, which they, out of 2 or 3 cycles of emails out to people, finally got to no, what we're saying is, you're making good money. E-commerce sites are revenue generating sites. And so spending some money on that's the best time to charge customers money. It's like, not in that I want the money grab, but in general, as an industry, people pay out of money they're making way better than when they just pay on the cost side, right? If you can align your product on the revenue side, way better. But this whole brouhaha happened once before, right? To the point where most everybody kind of yelled and screamed and said, you should grandfather the old people in. Now, if you've ever done math as it relates to this kind of thing, grandfathering doesn't solve this kind of problem, right? Because what you've discovered is the current customer base you already have and the amount of money that they brought in one time for the ongoing support, even if you grandfather them in, they're still the problem, right? You're still going to end up with too many people that are not bringing you revenue, but are giving you cost side equation. And so I understand everybody wanted them to do, to grandfather people in, but it was a bad call. And so they didn't grandfather people in. Eventually they did change the licensing part for some people. If you wished, you could click a button and say, I still want lifetime unlimited licensing, even if it wasn't unlimited support, right? But you got to understand that context to understand that now, a couple years later, people are just getting over the whole, remember that time when they came after all my money? They wrote me the email that said, I should take more of your money. And now suddenly they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And there's actually, again, a couple of contextual things that happened recently, right? In the last months, not the last days, they started auto renewals like last year, right? Where you bought something and you're like, wait, I think they're doing it. Like, I think I have a subscription now, right? And you didn't realize necessarily that you were going to have a subscription, but you did, right? Then we started getting emails that said, hey, this thing is going to expire soon and you're going to be charged again, right? And so it is not bad to have recurring revenue. It is not bad to have a subscription. But if the communication isn't sound, right, and the change from non-subscription to subscription was not well articulated, and now the change from getting a 50% discount to not getting a 50% discount was not well articulated, that's where people feel the rub. They feel frustrated because they're like, are the rules changing and I don't know about it? And the answer to that is Yes. Yes, the rules are changing. And the rules are changing because you're buying something different, right? WooCommerce, now owned by Automatic, is becoming more of a SaaS. And so as a software as a service delivery, they are giving you a license which you pay for on a yearly basis, right? But you know a lot of SaaSes that you buy on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. And at the end of the year, when you get renewed again, you don't get a discount for renewing because it's different than the old model that was not a SaaS, right? In the old model, you bought it, you could use it for 3 years. And then if you needed to renew it because you suddenly wanted the latest update, you could pay then. In this model, they shifted to the continuity of recurring revenue. And in continuity of recurring revenue, there's no discount for renewal. So it makes perfect sense. If you ever bought Adobe software, you saw them, in the last couple of years shift from you bought Photoshop and then a couple of years you didn't buy the updates and then you bought again. And then they shifted to the you pay every month and you get no discount for paying every month. So it's a perfectly legitimate SaaS model. It's totally fine. It's just at some point you got to let people know.
But, okay, so you mentioned earlier when it was originally before the acquisition of WooCommerce, so when it was still WooThemes, or WooCommerce was part of WooThemes, it was in their terms of service. So they could do that pricing change. They did. They had a failure to communicate, and those were some other issues. But in terms of being okay to do, it was okay to do. So in this case, is it still, even though if it's good business sense, it's still okay to do?
It is totally okay to do. I think the first thing you have to get your head around is just because something worked one way in the past doesn't mean it will always work that way. There are ways to live in that past world. So you can buy it, put in a credit card that's going to expire. The credit card's going to expire. They can't charge you later, and you can keep your old code without getting updated, right? But you won't get the updates, right? And if you don't get the updates, several little things may happen, right? There may be a security issue. There may be the fact that you're going to get nagged, right? Like you still haven't done this, and who knows where it will change from there, right? But they don't force you to live in their new world. They invite you to live in their new world. They just invite you with an assumptive close, right? Which in many business practices, you go that, hey, good on you, right? But as the consumer of it, you just have to know, okay, it looks like some of the rules are changing. Getting up in arms about it, right? Like they shouldn't do that, or they shouldn't be able to do that, or that's just wrong to do. Well, that's wrong to say, right? Because you're like, no, it's perfectly legitimate for them to change their business model. Is it okay for them to do it? Absolutely, right? Should they do it? From a business perspective, probably, right? Recurring revenue keeps the business going, right? And it makes sense to do. Should they communicate about it? Should they communicate about it in advance and prep people and all that kind of good stuff? Yes. And I think that's where companies have struggled. Some people have not shared in advance. So I'm sure you read a while ago, right? Pippin did a change and didn't announce the change until it happened, right? You know what I'm talking about?
I do. But he also wrote a rather, I thought it was an eloquent post explaining what he did, why he did it, the decisions behind it. And it actually sounded like it wasn't just a money grab, that it was actually like, we're trying to do something good for our customers here as well.
Yep. And I think at times that is what motivates people, right? It's rare that they're like, I'm going to take this money and run, because they still have to hang out with all of us, right? I mean, like they're still part of the community. So they can't do the whole, I'm going to grab this money and run to Costa Rica. Oh, but I got to speak at WordCamp next month, right? Like these people still, like almost everyone I know who shifts to a recurring revenue model is still going to be around. It's just a question of, do you talk about it in advance and prep people for it? Do you not talk about it, but explain it well after the fact? Or do you just not talk about it at all, right? And in this particular case with WooCommerce, the mode tends to be not talk about it at all. So they shifted to a subscription-based service, never talked about it. They merged your WordPress.com and your WooCommerce login, which also had this weird ancillary consequence of the fact that if I have an account and I get the plugin, but for another customer, and now the customer rather gets the account, but I'm the one working on it. I can't get in until they had to make another change. All of that was done just magically. Like one night at midnight, I'm doing something and I log in and I go, what is this? The shifting of the renewal rates, these are all changes that they're totally fine to do and even may make sense for them from a business perspective. But at some level, you're like, who's in charge of the communication, right? And
well, that's what, yeah. Like, are these the developers that are coming up with the marketing plans? And not,
no,
not
and
actually.
No, and I really don't think these are, so I think these are business choices, not necessarily marketing choices. So I think there is a marketing team, right? Marketing team is doing great work to be like, hey, who's using WooCommerce? How are you using it? Let's tell the story. Let's get it out. Their marketing over the last several years has gotten really, really good. I think this is a business decision. And like I said, probably pretty sound, right? But when it comes back, when you look back and you go, what can we do better here, right? I think what you have to remember is that there are all different sizes of stores. And some stores are making tons of money, doing great, what have you. Some stores aren't, right? And they're just getting started. And so they looked at that expense of different plugins as kind of a one-time cost. And they're not even sure going to renew, right? But now you put them on a subscription and you take away a discount. And so those people feel burdened and frustrated, right? And then the developers for them who are pricing low, they feel frustrated. And so you kind of go, how do you solve? If it were me, right? Which it's not, I'm not responsible for anything over there. But I think I would solve the problem completely differently, which is to say, with so much desire for training and education around WooCommerce, right? I'd probably just create a WooCommerce masterclass that taught people how to not only build more advanced things, but also how to build their own extensions and also how to price better. So that you get the audience that is talking about, it's time to go pick another plugin. And you're like, nah, what are you talking about? Like, that's stupid. And I don't mean the people are stupid. I mean the idea that for a small portion of renewal rates, you would excavate all the value you've already created and go double down and spend on a whole nother platform just to make the move. You go, that business-wise, it doesn't make sense. But how do you get those people equipped and trained, certified, right, to think about this more effectively and to pitch better, right? And to sell better and to generate enough revenue that paying that additional fee is not a big deal. But I also think the kinds of developers that are building WooCommerce sites sometimes are not developers, right? As much as they are kind of assembling the solution and just grabbing whatever extensions seem to make sense and add the features the customer wants, instead of telling their customer no, or instead of telling their customer, why don't you wait until you've proven that you're ready for that feature. And so the net result is these guys are running with 30 extensions from WooCommerce, and they probably could have launched a store with 4, right? Or they could have written one themselves to just say, you know what, if I just need to download this data out of here, I'll just do that. I don't need to buy a plugin for that, right? I think that's part of the rub of what we're seeing.
Yeah, well articulated. Don't excavate all the value you have already created only to go double down somewhere else on another plugin. I think, yeah, that does tend to be the reaction or the emotional reaction when something like that happens. But the reality, like you said, is, how, as a percentage of doing business through your e-commerce store, for some people, those WooCommerce subscriptions are a drop in the bucket. And for others, they're, maybe they're not even making the price back, to justify the expense of something, which goes to your point of maybe they didn't need 30 to begin with. Go simple and go from there. Okay, so what do we need to be concerned about as users, either those of us who are already WooCommerce customers, or maybe those who are looking at the landscape of e-commerce plugins and thinking about, is this right for me? Any advice there?
So there's another little change that happened. And again, I just go, wow, there's a lot of stuff changing, not a lot of communication around it, that I would say this is kind of important for people to understand when they're thinking about buying extensions. And that is the model, right? The previous model of extensions was that you would, and I don't know the details of how you would apply and get approved to sell an extension on WooCommerce.com, but you would go through a process, and then there would be a rev share, right? A revenue share is the same thing that happens at, you know, Apple's App Store and other places where the main player, in this case Automatic with their WooCommerce store, takes a portion, and the folks that created the product, they take a portion. So there's a rev split, right? It doesn't really matter what the split is. What's interesting is that in that model, where would support sit, right? Who was actually supporting the product? And one way you can think about this new, we don't need to do 50%. I think Matt was in an interview where he talked about, Matt Mullenweg, the CEO of Automatic, was in an interview where he talked about, you know, we've hired a lot more people for the WooCommerce team. And you go, that's exactly right. You have, and that's good. And that helps, right? Because support with WooCommerce and extensions have kind of been varied. But my understanding is that recently the percentage, the rev split is getting changed, with a little bit more shifting to the plugin authors, but that support is also shifting, right? So that the support, the plugin authors have to do more of the support. And that we should be scratching our head, right? Because you're like, okay, you're bringing more people, which would be great if you were keeping more support. But if you're bringing on more people, but then you're pushing some of the support out to the guys who coded it, then the more people are doing something else, which we don't know what they're working on. But then it's back to the other teams. And some of those teams may be great at supporting their plugins, but some of the others may not be, right? So we might see a dip in support as a consequence of this other shift that was unrelated to what we're doing, right? But you can imagine if you bought an extension. Now, let me take a small break to say, if you buy an extension from Skyverge, or you buy an extension from ProsPress, or you buy an extension at a store called Shop Plugins, right? You can trust these teams. They're fantastic. I'm sure there are others too that are fantastic. I don't know them all, but I know the folks at ProsPress, at Skyverge, at Shop Plugins, and I go, no, these folks are great. More support from them is groovy. Like they're sharp, they're on it, they're constantly working on that, on their products and platforms. Two of the most popular plugins that are sold at WooCommerce.com are the subscriptions plugin by ProsPress and Brent and his team there, and then Becca and the folks at Skyverge do memberships, right? Those are two of the biggest selling plugins. And you're great if you have those teams doing support. They have real teams, full teams, they're doing work. That's awesome. That's
their entire business. They're committed.
That's their business, right? They do, like Skyverge does stuff for WooCommerce, and they also do it for Shopify, right? And so they build some of these features on too, but they're e-commerce people and they're supporting it. That's fantastic. But what should concern us, right? Which should at least cause you to scratch your head a little bit and go, okay, I need to evaluate not just this feature, like, does it exist? Great, I'll buy it, right? But who is behind this? And do they have a lot of these extensions and therefore this is their full-time business? Or is this a person who created it and then decided to sell, just put it on the market, right? Because if it's a very small team and now you're not getting a 50% discount, so you're paying slightly more, but at the same time, all those new people are not necessarily on that, because now the support is going back to those original guys, folks that are doing it, and you go, I don't know if this plugin's the extension's gonna stick around. I don't know if it's gonna be supported. There's a whole lot more anxiety that you may have, which means the evaluation of the extensions you choose for your site and for your customer site should have greater rigor than ever before, right? That is something, and it's worth, for the right ones, right? For Skyverge plugins, for ProsPress plugins, I'll pay 100% every year. Right? I don't need a discount. I got no problems. Those plugins are fantastic. Not the same for all the others, right? Or for many of the others. And there's somewhere I just go, no, this is a good time as any to kind of step back. Does that make sense?
It does make total sense. And that, it kind of makes me want to veer off a little bit on the on that conversation of that business model with third-party developers contributing add-ons and different little chunks of functionality that you can bolt onto the original plugin. And I think for a while, I could be wrong, but I think for a while WooCommerce closed down their marketplace to third-party extensions, and then at some point
they haven't closed so much. They limited who was in that realm. You may be remembering that Easy Digital Downloads they had a marketplace with a lot of third-party players, and they literally started buying them off those guys because they wanted a consistent experience both in product and UI and support and everything else. And so they literally started tucking some of them back and closing off some of the third party because Pippin needed a stable base of extensions that were going to stay updated, right? Like, again, you sell through, if for both WooCommerce and Easy Digital Downloads, if you're selling someone else's code, but your brand is attached to it and the code goes sideways, your brand takes a hit, right? So they've approached it with slightly different models, but EDD did kind of restrict and try and take most of their extensions internal rather than letting external people govern it there.
Okay, thanks for the correction on that. And I know nothing, but from an outside perspective, it does seem like bringing in that cohesive brand experience that you would get by bringing all of the support in-house, or at least putting more of the burden on support on the core plugin team versus these development teams that may or may not be around for the long haul in terms of commitment to keeping up their plugins and providing support. It seems like that Easy Digital Downloads model is a little bit more stable or sound. Yeah,
and so it totally makes sense. I think the toothpaste is out of the toothpaste tube.
Yeah, you can't put it back or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. The toothpaste is out of the tube on the WooCommerce side, right? Like you're not gonna go. It would be really surprising if Automatic were going to go buy all the extensions and tuck them in and then staff it up to support all of them. So I think the calculus they've done is not all these plugins are worth supporting at the same level and at the cost of having staff that all have to sit around waiting for each one to come out. And so I think they're making a very intelligent business choice to push some of that back, but they're making a good business choice for themselves. I don't know what that means for the people who originally created this, if they're positioned well to handle that level of support, right? And you'd think some people are, right? The Prospress, the Skyverge, there's probably some others that you go, not sure so much, right? And so I think I would just say, spend a lot more time, not just evaluating. A lot of times we evaluate, does this extension do what I want it to do? And I would say you need to ask the next question, which is, are the people who built this going to be around in the long haul? Have they demonstrated a capacity to really support and stick through this? And so that I can put my money here and still pay them 100% next year and the year after that, but I can trust that these guys are going to solve the problem. If not, do I start looking otherwhere, or do I start building myself?
Great criteria, Mr. Lima. I've got a couple more questions for you. One thing that was brought up, or is my understanding that this was a test rollout by WooCommerce on the renewals thing, so that it wasn't sent out to their entire customer base. Or do you think, or maybe they're going to learn from kind of what went wrong in this test in terms of communication and correct those things before they roll out fully to their customer base? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the people over at Automatic and behind WooCommerce are smart folks. So I think they will. I think they probably learn from everything, right? I mean, they're a size of organization that is much larger than most of the WordPress organizations, and so their capacity for ingesting data and feedback and then closing that loop and providing a smarter next step is better than most, right? Their ability to do that makes sense, and so I do think they rolled it out and tested it some, and then now they've heard a whole bunch of people. I think they will get better at it. I don't think they'll fully roll it back because I think it makes sense, right? I belong to several SaaSes and they don't discount me on renewal, right? They're just like, nah, dude, that's the price. It was the price the whole time, right? So So I think they're shifting towards SaaS model, and I think that makes sense for them. So I don't know that they'll roll it back as much as they'll go, okay, maybe we should figure out what's going to be final, and then we should probably announce, or we should articulate something. But I do think when they say, or when anyone says, well, they're running it as a test, I think the best follow-up question is, okay, what percentage of the market was tested, right? Was this a 1% test? Is this a 5% test?
Is it 100% of people that renewed on this?
Was it an 89% test? You know, like it's one thing to say, oh, it's a test, and you go, great, right? But I've worked with companies who are like, it's a test, and then you go, okay, what'd you test? Well, we rolled it out to everyone. We're just going to see what it did. Versus, well, we took 2% of the audience and we rolled that out, and we're checking that, and then based on that, we're going to go back to the 98. And you go, okay, there's enough people clamoring that I don't think it was a 1 or 2% test. Also, though, they could be clamoring simply because these things, when they get out, right? They get out and they get on social, they get out and they get on articles, and then people start reacting to what they're reading rather than what they're experiencing, right? But that's PR, right? And so you have to be thinking through, hey, even if I do a 2% test, what's my messaging, right? What's my messaging? What's the story? What's the narrative? So that people can take that in and go, okay, we get it. That's fair. That seems right. And not one of those emails that says, well, you're making a lot of money, so I figure I should make more money too. You go, no, that doesn't seem to be a good message, right?
Well, we'll wrap up with this question, and that is, what does this mean going forward, and both in terms of maybe for the rest of the users that weren't part of the test, but also for the WordPress ecosystem. A lot of us or smaller shops look up to these big shops in terms of how they're doing pricing, what their business models are, what they're doing right, what they're doing not right. Do you think that we'll see some changes across other players in the WordPress ecosystem based off of this change?
So I think there are three things that you want to think about going forward that are worth evaluating. The first one we talked about already, which is spend some of your due diligence on who is behind each extension and whether or not that extension is and the company behind it is worthy of saying, yep, I'm investing here. The second is to think through, do I need this as an extension that someone else wrote, or can I code it? Because maybe I don't need the full feature set, right? So there are some plugins out there that are wildly complicated. Subscriptions is one of those, right? I mean, first of all, you're dealing with payment gateways, and you're dealing with subscription, you're dealing with continuity, you're dealing with pausing and not, and upgrades and downgrades. I mean, that's a lot of code. Plus, WordPress or WooCommerce itself changes over time, and so backward compatibility. I mean, you don't want to build that on your own. But I use this example because one of my friends the other day was like, "Hey, how do I export all my orders to CSV?" And he went looking, and he's like, "It's an extent. I have to pay $79 to export my orders as CSV." And you go, And then, of course, he uploaded the plugin, right? And then that did something to his permalinks. Like, he needed to refresh permalinks. But before he refreshed the permalinks, things on the site started breaking. And he was like, what happened, right? And this is the stuff that leads my friend to go, maybe no to WordPress and WooCommerce, right? He started looking at Craft CMS this last weekend. And I'm like, no, don't leave. But these are the like, certain features feel more like they ought to sit in core. I don't know if that's what some of those new people are coming in to do, but being able to download your orders, it just seems like a no-brainer. In fact, that particular issue is one that I mentioned. We're rolling out a new hosted WooCommerce. I have folks looking at it to say, we should build it. We should build it for free. Submit it to them if they want to tuck it into core. And if not, just leave it available for free for our customers, because there's certain things that just ought to be in the platform. But in the same way that we'll build it, we won't build what the plugin does, right? The existing plugin. The existing plugin does 10 things. And you realize, yeah, but my buddy wanted one thing, right? And so they build 10 so they can charge a price. I can build one feature and just be done. And so the second piece of advice, like in terms of going from here, I go, there's certain small features you don't need a plugin for, right? You can write the code, or you can get someone to help you write the code and just say, I don't need all of these things. I need this little sliver. Let's just write that. put it in, manage it, and go from there. So that's the second thing. I think the third thing is a lot of people copied the WooCommerce business model back pre-acquisition, back in the WooThemes days, and they just did it because like they're doing well, so we should copy it, right? And I don't recommend that you do that, right? And so maybe this is a moment, I felt it back then when they did the pricing change. I was like, see, this, you should look here. And then now, and you go, oh, you should pay attention. You just go, just be clear that you're trying to actually build the same business that they're building, right? And that you're learning as much as you can from what they're doing. But the business model makes perfect sense. When you sell a plethora of options, it makes perfect sense when you have a specific need that can be solved by many options. So if you have outbound email connection and you go, could be MailChimp, could be MadMimi, could be, ConvertKit, could be Drip, then you go, yes, sell it as extensions because you're only going to need one, right? You don't need 5, you just need one. Same thing with payment gateways, right? 30, 40, 80 payment gateways, and you're like, but I only need one. So those scenarios where you say, I have a specific need, but there's a plethora of options, then you go, yes, an extension model makes a lot of sense. But, coupons, naming your price, or exporting your files as orders as CSV, you kind of feel like those are features the product should have already, right? And so the sad thing, and I'm not talking about WooCommerce per se, but the sad thing when you see people copy WooCommerce is they build a product and then they start stripping away features to make them extensions and give away one base and then say, now this is how I'm going to make money. And you go, you're copying a model that doesn't make sense for your product. Now you're giving away a broken product that can only become fulfilled by me buying other things. You might as well package it all up and put a price tag on it and moved on. So the third piece I'd say in general is make sure you're not copying a business model that doesn't apply to you. And so anytime there's a moment of reflection, you ought to step back and go, maybe I should do something different.
Make sure you're not copying a business model that doesn't apply to you. And ladies and gentlemen, that is just a snippet of the sorts of wisdom you hear from my friend, Chris Lima. Chris, I appreciate you joining me tonight. And don't go away yet because I'm going to ask you one burning question. But thank you to you guys who tuned in live tonight. You can catch a replay of this episode if you joined us late over at officehours.fm, or there is the Facebook page, Carrie Dill's Office Hours. So facebook.com/Carrie Dill's Office Hours, where you can feel free to follow up later and ask questions, and we'll try to get to those. I flubbed on the whole Facebook Live thing, so I didn't see your questions as we were rolling live. Sorry about that. But if you want to subscribe to the podcast and be in tune with later episodes, that would be awesome. It's officehours.fm /subscribe. And right now I'm in the middle of a series that's focused on web service, a freelance web services provider taking your project from cradle to a successful launch. It's fantastic. So you can check that out over there. And all right, Mr. Lima, here is my burning question for you. For someone that's just making their introduction into the cigar market, they want to smoke a cigar. They want to be able to post cool pictures like you do, smoking the cigar, but they've never smoked a cigar. Maybe they don't even smoke. What would be a cigar that you would recommend to that crowd?
Well, if they've never smoked a cigar ever, you're going to want a cigar that is relatively light. It's not full-bodied. It's not strong. It doesn't have any kind of harsh tones to it. You also want a cigar that has a real nice draw, which is bringing the oxygen through the cigar so that you're not sitting there trying to pull on it. You also probably want a shorter cigar, right? A size that, won't
of course you had one right there.
I'm at my desk. What did you want? You don't want a size that is a 2 or 3 hour cigar. You're like, I barely know you. So in that scenario, if you are more towards the sweeter side of things, you might like a Java. There is a if you ask anyone at the store, right? Do you have Java? Do you have? There is a hint of sweetness, just a fine touch of what feels like these leaves were bathed in chocolate before you start. But it's a hint. It's an aroma. It's not, like you're not going to actually eat chocolate. But it's a hint of chocolate, a hint of coffee. It's a Drew Estate cigar that is about that size, and you will enjoy that one. There is also you can also get a cigar that has not a sweet side of it, right? So you want to go the other way. You want to go with a cigar that still tastes exactly like a cigar, no sweetness to it, but you still want light. And so Drew Estate also has one called an Undercrown Shade, and that Undercrown Shade is a Connecticut wrapper, which is very light. So when you look at the cigar, you'll know that it's the right one if you say Undercrown Shade, because it looks like a tan or cafe au lait, like a really light colored outside wrapper. Whereas most of the undercrowns are darker, right? So a Maduro, you don't necessarily want to smoke that. So not as your first cigar. So I would look at, and they have the Undercrown Shade has a size called the Flying Pig, which is just fun to say, right? You walk in and you're like, you have an Undercrown Shade Flying Pig, and they go, woo, you're an expert. But the nice thing about that Flying Pig is it's really, really short. So you're not making a full lifetime commitment to smoking cigars if you do that. So those would be my two recommendations.
Brilliant. I don't even really smoke cigars, and you've actually kind of made me want to go try one that was as if the leaves were bathed in chocolate.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Lemma. Where is the best place for people to find you online?
I write over at chrislemma.com, and I'm on Twitter at @chrislemma. Those are probably the two easiest and best ways to find me.
Fantastic. I am your host, Carrie Dills, and you can find me on Twitter at OfficeHoursFM or over at officehours.fm. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Have a lovely evening.